we really needed to help Bob and Carol to see not only right now where their tax brackets were, but what their tax brackets would look like in retirement. And this really opened up Bob and Carol's eyes, right?
Welcome to the Retirement Solutions Podcast with your hosts, Ryan Thacker and Tyson Thacker from B.O.S.S Retirement Solutions. This is where you'll hear personal stories and interviews with industry leaders that can help you overcome the biggest challenges with planning for retirement today. And now, here are your hosts, Ryan Thacker and Tyson Thacker.
We are the Retirement Brothers from B.O.S.S Retirement Solutions and Advisors. We're so excited to be here today and to share with you today two different people who are in a similar retirement position to many of you. And we're sure that you're going to connect with them today. Their names are Bob and Carol, and they wanted to navigate retirement. They came and wanted to understand the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint. And so Ryan, tell us a little bit about Bob and Carol, who they are and where they were as we write about them in the book.
Yeah, for those of you who maybe are not familiar with our book is the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint, your guide to a secure and independent retirement. You can find it on Amazon or you can find it on our website. It was an Amazon bestseller, which we're proud of. But in the book, we have a character that we use on our B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint called Bob and Carol. Now, Bob and Carol are really a representation of the thousands of families that we've helped, just like you, go all the way through retirement. And that's one of the cool things about AI these days is we can actually take all the different scenarios and we can combine those together and we can come out with the Bob and Carol avatar. We'll talk a little bit about what they look like. But this is, these are Bob and Carol, just like you. They have a lot of different retirement concerns. And, Tyson, I think we set that stage in the book of what that looks like, right?
Yeah. Why don't you just describe a little bit about Bob and Carol and how they wanted to spend their retirement specifically out of the gate?
I think when you think about retirement, what is it that you want to do? Bob and Carol, for Bob, he wanted to hunt and fish more. That was one of his passions. He just loved being outdoors. And so he always envisioned when he didn't have to go into the office that now he could spend more time hunting and fishing. Carol really wanted to use this time to explore her interest. In college, she painted and took some art classes, but as life gets busy and you're raising a family, didn't have a lot of time with that. So she really wanted to explore her interests there in art. Also, they wanted to serve in their community. Their church was important to them, and so they wanted to spend time serving others in their church, serving others in the community. But more than anything, they wanted to allocate their precious time to their family, kids and grandkids. And, this is the time when you think about just being able to take trips together and being able to talk about what matters most. And I think what we talk about, Tyson, is we meet with many, many families, is it's not about the location, but it's about the time.
Yeah.
And where you can spend that and just be together.
Well, and I remember one of my clients coming to me and he started talking about some of these same things like Bob and Carol. And at the end, he said, really, I want you to take care of the dollars and cents so I can be with the people that I love and do the things and create the ideas that I'm passionate about. Isn't that really what we're talking about with Bob and Carol too here is when we summarize everything that you just mentioned?
Yeah. I mean, you can retire when you have enough reliable income that pays for your lifestyle.
Right.
Retirement's no more complicated than that, but it does get really complicated when you look at all of the details. I mean, you can go into all these different rabbit holes when it comes to retirement planning. And, bottom line is Bob and Carol, they've worked hard their entire lives to save money. Pretty much they know they will get a Social Security check because they've been paying in Social Security for so long. But, then they're concerned about things like, do I have enough?
Right.
Have I saved enough money? Am I going to run out of money? I mean, no one wants to be 85 years old, full life and flat broke. I mean, that's just not the plan that anyone wanted. And so really what they wanted to do is, they wanted to find a way that they could spend their golden years making golden moments with the grandkids, right?
Absolutely. And, we really have a couple of different camps when people come in and see us. The first camp is kind of like Bob and Carol, where they do know what they wanted right out of the gates, and they can really describe it, and they can describe it in detail, and you can almost imagine it in your head, and they get excited about it. That's one of the fun things when somebody comes in is we have the chance to sit down and talk about this stuff. And you'll probably never talk to anybody in as much detail as you will with one of our advisors at B.O.S.S Retirement Solutions and Advisors than you will about this. So those who are passionate and know right away, they get really excited. Now there's this other camp, and this reminds us of our own mom a little bit. When the first time we talked about retirement with our own mom and dad, mom, when we asked this question to mom, she said, "You know what? I've been so busy raising kids. In our case, a total of 7 kids. I'm number 5. You're number 6." And she said, I've been so busy raising kids, I don't even know what I would do in retirement. I haven't even thought about transitioning from being a mom and a grandma. And so, those are the 2 camps that you really have, is somebody who has thought a lot about it, and then other people that you want to start the process and be thinking about it. So if you think about which camp you're in, and if you're somebody who hasn't thought much about this yet, would really encourage you to start putting the pen to paper and writing some things down that you want to do in retirement, right?
Tyson, that's a good point. In fact, in the book, we have the B.O.S.S Retirement Scorecard. And the scorecard really helps you focus in and measure where you are in retirement. I think as individuals come in and visit with us, they want to know, how am I doing? And really what they're saying is, how am I doing compared to everybody else? And
Yeah.
we always joke and say, comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Right.
Famous quote. And so it's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about how do I make sure that I have a system of security? How do I make sure I build this optimal system of security? And that's what B.O.S.S stands for. Build the optimal system of security for retirement. Being able to understand what your needs are, what your concerns are, and that's where the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint starts. Because if you can identify what you want, and I think everyone's really good at identifying what they don't want, right?
Sure.
They don't want to lose money. They don't want to pay too much in taxes. But getting that clarity, just like Bob here in this example, he wanted to spend more time hunting and fishing. Carol wanted to spend more time painting, and ultimately spending time with grandkids. I think that's where it all begins. And this journey is unique and it's individual for everybody. And that's what we love about this podcast is, today sharing this story about Bob and Carol. Hopefully that's going to help you be able to see some things that maybe you haven't thought about before. And, in Bob and Carol's case, Tyson, one of the big obstacles that they have, and I think many people are waking up to this fact, is it comes to taxes. So let's talk a little bit about Bob and Carol's tax scenario and why it was a challenge.
Yeah, so there are so many categories that we talk about in the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint itself. But one of the things that Bob and Carol weren't really aware of was, and so many of you are facing the same thing, you may not have thought about it either, it's taxes, just like Ryan mentioned. And as you prepare for retirement, everybody's got different risks, but most people are facing taxes as a risk. And those taxes are as individual as the different personalities of your kids and your grandkids. And so when we look at this for individuals and families, we really want to, as you mentioned, Ryan, everybody's got their own situation. So we dive deep and we say, what are those risks? For Bob and Carol, they had a plan for themselves and their family, but unfortunately they hadn't thought much about Uncle Sam. So you think about
he's the uncle you don't want to plan for most people,
exactly.
Right?
He's the uncle that nobody wants to go and talk to at the family party.
No one wants to give Uncle Sam a Christmas present.
Exactly. Uncle Sam wants a huge Christmas present every year. And so Bob and Carol, they didn't realize that they had a lot of IRAs and 401ks. And those are going to be taxed. And so when you think about different ways of taxing, different kinds of accounts, there's taxed always, taxed later, and taxed rarely. And taxed always are retirement accounts like an IRA and a 401k. And they also fall into that tax later category because you know when you're setting money aside, you actually get a tax break. But when you get to retirement, you lose all control over those. And then, there is this taxed rarely bucket that's where we really wanted to help Bob and Carol get into. It is to move some of these accounts around and to be able to help them take the dollars of where they are at. And we're at a 40-year tax low right now. But that changes January 1, 2026, as of the time that we're recording this podcast. And so we really needed to help Bob and Carol to see not only right now where their tax brackets were, but what their tax brackets would look like in retirement. And this really opened up Bob and Carol's eyes, right?
Well, Tyson, here's the summary of that. Is you talked about those three buckets, and when you're thinking about those buckets, what fits in those buckets, right? And this is where tax preparation and tax planning comes in. Tax preparation is when you just fill out your forms. You do it every April 15th. Whether it's you, your CPA, or maybe you have a complex scenario and you've got a tax attorney. We're not giving tax advice here. We recommend you always get your own individual customized situation from a qualified tax professional, but you should understand the basics, right? And tax planning is when you sit down and you not only look at what happened on April 15th, because you're just looking in the rearview mirror of what happened last year, but you're looking forward. We recommend that you look forward 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years into the future. Of course, we're not going to know what the tax rates are going to be there, but you can start to create a plan. For example, here's what you should know. In the tax deferred bucket, that's your IRAs, your 401ks, your TSPs, your 403bs, and Ed Slott, who the Wall Street Journal calls America's IRA expert. He says, if you have an IRA, you have an IOU to Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
And so you better start planning for that, because if you have a plan for it, the goal of what you can accomplish is you can save tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes by having a plan. And it's so interesting to watch people at the end of the year. What deductions can I do? Can I max out a contribution to a 401k or an IRA? Can I make some charitable contributions? But yet very few people look into the future and say, how am I going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax by having a tax plan? And that's, Bob and Carol, we're going to talk about what the number was, because I think what you can measure, you can start to really make a plan for that, and so you can affect that and minimize the tax. But that's critical, and when you pivot to this tax planning piece, Bob and Carol are the example of how you can save literally hundreds of thousands of dollars by minimizing taxes.
And it's why we wrote Bob and Carol into the book, right? Is because we want each of you, as we're talking about Bob and Carol in the book, to put yourself in Bob and Carol's shoes and see what issues there are. So there was a couple of other things that I want to mention to lay the foundation for this scenario that you're going to face, which is number one, I mentioned the taxes are going up January 1, 2026. The brackets are going to go back to where they were before 2017. And David Walker, who used to be the former comptroller for the U.S. government, basically the CPA for the U.S. government, said taxes have got to go up based off of all of the different things that we've promised the government. In fact, he said, or the government promised us. So there's things like Social Security, Medicare, pensions that have been promised. And if you think about the national debt being at $34.5 trillion with the T right now, he said all of these other things that have been promised, if you add all of them up, they're over $123 trillion.
That's not lunch money.
That is not lunch money at all. That's not chump change. And so another big piece of this that you have to be aware of is taxes are going up. And then lastly, a lot of people don't even know that Social Security can get taxed. And Bob and Carol were not aware that they could be taxed on as up to 85% of their benefit. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that that's what they're going to get taxed is 85%. But what it does mean is, let's say that Bob and Carol are getting paid $36,000 a year in Social Security. Up to 85% of that 36,000 could be taxed in Social Security. And with Social Security looking like it needs to be bailed out again, it could go up to 100% at some point. So those are some of the things that Bob and Carol were concerned with and needed help with, right?
So let's identify and let's measure this tax torpedo, Tyson, because for Bob and Carol, it's significant. Bob and Carol, they've saved just over $1 million for retirement. And we have a really unique tool that we can, it's called, the B.O.S.S retirement tax analysis. And we can measure at today's current tax rates and throw in things like required minimum distributions and what happens if you pay the tax and you put that in a brokerage account and invest that. We can measure it. And here's what is awesome. Just over $1 million saved for retirement. But as we looked at their scenario, they were going to pay $884,000 in taxes on their $1 million IRA and 401k because of required minimum distributions. Now, required minimum distributions start at age 73. Remember the fact that you've never paid for any of that money. It went in tax-free. It's growing tax-deferred. But now Uncle Sam wants his piece because required minimum distributions. So when we measure this from 73 to 90, Bob and Carol, $884,000. Think about it. Most people say, okay, I've got $1 million. I'm going to pay, say, a third of that in taxes, or $333,000. Well, remember, your account's growing. In this case, for Bob and Carol, the account's growing by 5%. So it's been growing and compounding and growing and compounding since the time they retired. They have to start taking out required minimum distributions. When you take out those required minimum distributions, they get bigger every year as you get older, because Uncle Sam said, hey, I let you put this all in tax-free at the beginning, but now I want some extra money, right? Now I want to get my payday on what's happening. Remember, your payday is after it's grown and gotten so much bigger. That's Uncle Sam's payday that he's going to get on all of that growth. And in this case, $1 million, it's growing, but $884,000 in taxes, and that does not include the Social Security tax.
Well, and what's crazy about this, we call this the Get More with Boss number, and we add all of these. We call it stacking. We stack, we're talking about taxes today, but we stack the Social Security amount that you're going to get extra and how much extra you're going to be getting in minimizing your costs and maximizing your returns. And all of these things really move the needle. And one of the things that you'll notice is we haven't even talked yet about a product, and we won't even talk about a product today, because the reality is all of this, what we call the Get More with Boss number, that the taxes are included, is so important for you to understand before you get to how much you've saved and what that looks like in retirement, how much you can get. Obviously, income is a big piece of this, but what could you do with $884,000, right? There's a lot that you could do with $884,000.
That's a lot of atomic fireballs, Tyson. We could buy a lot of atomic fireballs for that price.
You could buy a lot of things with $884,000. Now, keep in mind, just to keep our compliance officer happy, Bob and Carol are it's an amalgamation of a lot of different people that we've helped retire. But we want you to really think through this in your own scenario and start thinking about, well, how much do taxes move the needle in my scenario? If Bob and Carol had $1 million, but they keep an extra $884,000 from the time they retire to the time that they both pass, what's that number look like for you? It's pretty big. This taxes are the biggest number, the biggest needle mover out of anything that we look at in most cases for people who are ready to retire.
Now, of course, Bob and Carol, because they signed up for the 401k and IRA plan, they're going to pay some taxes, right? Sure. And so this is where the plan, and let's just talk a little bit, we talk about this in the book. Bob and Carol, their tax bill was $884,000. Now we'd like to keep all of that, but you agreed to the plan. So now the goal is we got to minimize the taxes. So instead of paying $884,000, we want to come up with a plan. And as they sat down and we looked at their scenario, what we did is we created some tax planning strategies on the timing of how and when to take that out of the IRAs. And so we were able to minimize that tax cut down to just over $300,000. So all of a sudden we've got the taxes now, instead of paying $884,000, you're paying it's about $330,000 in tax.
So what does that leave left over, right? That's what you're really getting to.
Yeah, the total savings, $572,000. And that's really, Tyson, is you're saying, what would you do with all that extra money? Well, Uncle Sam's not going to let you have the whole piece because you agreed to the plan. But by having a plan and a strategy, this case is, say, Bob and Carol, $572,000 in retirement taxes. That is incredible. That is incredible. And, then you also need to look at things like, well, how am I going to bring in Social Security into this picture? What if you have a pension? What if you have income that comes from outside sources like investment income, or you have income that comes from real estate? How do all these pieces come together? This is where you want to work hand in glove with the professionals. I think so many things, Tyson, in the past, in retirement planning was all about just only investment management.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, we're going to create this portfolio. And thanks to technology, Vanguard, you think of Vanguard and you think of the Fidelities out there. They've done a really good job of creating low cost investment platforms, in the case of Vanguard. But what we see now is here we are, this experiment of the 401k. We're now decades into this experiment, and we're now at the peak of baby boomers. And we're starting to see these baby boomers retiring. And we've been preaching this for well over a decade. It needs to be comprehensive. When you create your plan, it's more than just your investment management. It's about where's your income going to come from. It's about how are you going to grow and manage your risk, because it's very different managing your risk in retirement and when you're retired than when you're just building the nest egg. And then we're going to look at taxes, just like what we've talked about in Bob and Carol. And then you're going to look at what happens to everything when I pass away, or I want to make sure that everything that I've worked really hard for goes to those that I love, my family or my favorite charity, whoever that is. And if you sum all that together, Tyson, that's what the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint is. It's a comprehensive game plan to help you build a comprehensive blueprint for retirement.
Well, and what's so fun about this is I want to go back full circle to how Bob and Carol talked about what they wanted to do in retirement. These dollars, as I talked about, this client of mine saying, Tyson, I want you to take care of the dollars and cents so I can do what I love. Mm-hmm. That $572,000 for Bob and Carol, it's pretty incredible what you could do with that. And so, if you're thinking about what you could do in retirement and get your own Get More with B.O.S.S number, that's what we're excited about. Is we wanted you today to be able to put yourself in Bob and Carol's shoes, and we want you to be able to, through the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint, is the way that Ryan's described it, to get to and through retirement with confidence and clarity. That's what this is all about. We want to ensure that no matter what's happening on Capitol Hill in Washington, that we create and help you to see your own retirement vision through the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint. So with that, we're so glad that you've spent a few minutes with us today. We hope that this has just whetted your appetite for more, because taxes are a big deal, but we have so much more to share. And if you liked this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on whichever platform that you're on. Please share this podcast with your friends. We're so excited to be able to continue this journey with Bob and Carol, and especially with you, to be able to have a worry-free retirement. So we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Solutions Podcast with Ryan Thacker and Tyson Thacker. To learn how you can make your money go a lot further in retirement, go to bossretirement.com/podcast to receive a free B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another story that can help you make the most out of every dollar you've saved for retirement. Advisory services offered through B.O.S.S Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance products and services offered through B.O.S.S Retirement Solutions. Information contained in this material is for informational purposes only. Actual results may vary. No statement contained herein shall constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. The information is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of any individual. You should seek advice on legal and tax questions from an independent attorney or tax advisor. B.O.S.S is not affiliated with the U.S. government or any government agency. Marketing materials provided by Infinity Marketing Services.